Hi, I'm John Green. Welcome to my salon. I think my brother is about to get eaten by an anglerfish. This is Mental Floss on YouTube. And did you know that Martin Scorsese wanted The Clash to star in Gangs of New York before Leonardo DiCaprio and Daniel Day-Lewis came along? So The Clash are like, oh, should I stay or should I go? And then they went. Or alternately, The Clash were like, I'm sorry, Martin Scorsese, but London is calling. Those are both terrible jokes. Anyway, that's the first of many tragically unfinished films that I'm going to tell you about today. Both David Lynch and David Cronenberg were in consideration to make a Star Wars film, although they both claim they were only approached and nothing further. And speaking of David Lynch films that were never made, Ronnie Rocket was going to be his follow-up to Eraserhead. The film is about a 3-foot-tall man who runs on electricity. In a 2013 interview, Lynch said that he's still open to making the film, actually, but fears not being able to find the industrial-looking locations that he needs. He claimed, quote, cheap storm windows and graffiti have ruined the world for Ronnie Rocket. There are a couple films that couldn't be completed because a star died halfway through the shooting process, like the 1962 movie Something's Gotta Give, which would have starred Marilyn Monroe. Then there's the famously cursed adaptation of the great comic novel A Confederacy of Dunces, like John Belushi was cast in 1982 and then died. The role was given to John Candy in 1994 and then he died. The same thing happened to Chris Farley in 1997. What is this? And then a few years later, Will Ferrell hoped to star in the film, but it still looks like it's not going to get made. Just don't die, Will Ferrell. I need you in Anchorman 5. In 1989, Sergio Leone, the director of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, had secured $100 million in financing for his war epic Leningrad, which he wanted to star Robert De Niro, but Leone died mere months before they were going to start production. And then there's the Disney version of The Little Prince, which was written by none other than Orson Welles and storyboarded in the 1930s, but then never made. There have been a few other Disney movies that weren't ever made, including an adaptation of Roald Dahl's The Gremlins, a 2009 remake of Yellow Submarine, and Uncle Stiltskin, the story of Rumpelstiltskin. Orson Welles also tried to adapt Heart of Darkness into a film before it was rejected by his studio, RKO, for being too costly. He then attempted to take on an adaptation of The Smiler with a Knife, starring Lucille Ball, which RKO also rejected. The film he then made? Citizen Kane. When Orson Welles died, by the way, he left behind 300,000 feet of his film for Don Quixote, which, if you've ever actually read Don Quixote, is kind of hilarious, but also tragic. Like the book. He made several films for the sole purpose of financing Don Quixote, and he spent like 30 years trying to shoot and complete the project in locations like Mexico and Spain and Italy, but then he died. The 1990s saw the development of a Tim Burton-directed and Kevin Smith-written film titled Superman Lives, starring none other than Nick Cage as Superman, and also presumably Clark Kent. Luckily for our imaginations, photos of Cage as Superman have leaked online. Unluckily, copyright law prevents us from showing them to you. There were a bunch of Spider-Man movies that were never made, like a 4th film in the Tobey Maguire series, which started and then stopped production, and also a 1991 film written and directed by James Cameron, in which Spider-Man lives on an ocean liner and is 8 feet 6 inches tall and blue. Other abandoned superhero movies that made it into various stages of production and planning include Plastic Man, The Flash, Green Arrow, Dazzler, and Silver Surfer, which I would still like to see. But that's nothing compared to a 1965 Batman vs. Godzilla movie that was never made. I mean, how can you not revive that project, Hollywood? You made the movie Battleship. Please, if not that, at least 1964's Godzilla vs. Frankenstein. Here are some other A#1 ideas, Hollywood. Batman vs. Ducky, Batman vs. Boba Fett, and Batman vs. Dwight Eisenhower. Bradley Cooper was supposed to play Lucifer in an adaptation of John Milton's Paradise Lost, but the special effects budget was too large for Legendary Pictures to handle. I mean, there are a lot of flying angels in that book, so production stopped in 2012. Francis Ford Coppola spent almost 20 years planning a science fiction film titled Megalopolis. He even had 30 hours of footage filmed, specifically sequences of New York pre- and post-9/11. A major part of the film's plot involved rebuilding New York, so after 9/11, Coppola stated, "I feel as though history has come to my doorstep, but then production got too expensive and stopped later in 2001, so much for history at your doorstep, dude. Before David Lynch adapted Dune, Alejandro Jodorowsky wanted to make the film in the 1970s, starring some people you might have heard of, like Orson Welles, Mick Jagger, and Salvador Dali. He also wanted Pink Floyd to provide the soundtrack. Again, finances made the film impossible, which makes sense because apparently Dali insisted to be paid $100,000 per hour. Ridley Scott was later hired to make Dune, but had to drop out, so we got David Lynch, which, not so bad. Mel Gibson was preparing to make an adaptation of Fahrenheit 451 in 2006, but you may remember that there were other things going on in Mel Gibson's life in 2006, so yeah, no. In 1971, Stanley Kubrick wrote to a colleague, "It's impossible to tell you what I'm going to do, except to say that I expect to make the best movie ever made." We'll never know if he was right, because Napoleon never went into production. The budget was around $5.2 million, which is like $33 million in today's terms, and the Romanian army had even agreed to be in the battle scenes, because, this was pre-CGI. But Kubrick couldn't get the money together. He continued to work on the movie until his death in 1999, collecting one of the world's largest and most comprehensive archives about Napoleon inside of his own house. And the saga isn't over yet, because Steven Spielberg hopes to make a miniseries from Kubrick's script. Ridley Scott planned to adapt Cormac McCarthy's violent novel Blood Meridian, but later stated, "I think it's a really tricky one, and maybe it's something that should be left as a novel," which, by the way, is what many hundreds of movie producers have said about my book Looking for Alaska in the last 10 years. David Fincher worked for a long time on a remake of the film Heavy Metal, but he couldn't get it made because it was impossible to get a studio to sign on to an R-rated cartoon, even after famous directors agreed to join the project, like James Cameron, Zack Snyder, who directed 300, and Gore Verbinski, who directed Pirates of the Caribbean. Fincher still couldn't get the project going. Peter Jackson hired Neil Blomkamp to direct a movie based on the Halo video game series, but the movie stopped production in 2006. And then Jackson and his partner felt really bad for Blomkamp, so they helped him get $30 million for his passion project, which would become the Oscar-nominated District 9. Moral of the story, get Peter Jackson to feel bad for you, because then he'll find you $30 million. In the 1960s, John Lennon desperately wanted to play the role of Gollum in The Lord of the Rings. Paul McCartney would be Frodo, Ringo Starr would be Sam, and George Harrison would be Gandalf, and no, I am not making this up. Stanley Kubrick was approached to direct the movie, but J.R.R. Tolkien owned the movie rights to his book and wouldn't allow the project to happen. You monster! I'm just gonna put this out there right now. If the boys from One Direction want to star in a movie version of An Abundance of Catherines, I'm in. You guys remember when I compared One Direction to the Beatles? Sometimes movies do get made, but then they're lost, which is what happened to Quentin Tarantino's 1987 film My Best Friend's Birthday. Only 36 out of 70 minutes of the film survived due to an unfortunate fire. What? They're both boy bands? Alright, another example of an apparently lost film is Uncle Tom's Fairy Tales, one of Richard Pryor's first movies. For years, it was rumored that Pryor's wife destroyed the film's negatives, never to be seen again, but then in 2005, a Directors Guild film retrospective apparently featured clips from the movie. So, is it gone forever? We still don't know. One of the biggest mysteries to film fans is The Day the Clown Cried from 1972. Jerry Lewis directed and starred in his first serious film about a clown entertaining children in a Nazi concentration camp. The film is finished, but Lewis never allowed it to be released for still unknown reasons. In 1977, the great Roger Ebert wrote a screenplay for Who Killed Bambi, which would have been similar to the Beatles films, but starred the Sex Pistols. 2 days into filming, production stopped due to financial problems, but Ebert posted the screenplay on his blog in 2010. Link in the doobly-doo. Before Martin Scorsese made the Oscar-nominated film The Aviator starring Leonardo DiCaprio, Christopher Nolan wanted to make a Howard Hughes biopic starring Jim Carrey. After the fact, the director said, "Luckily, I managed to find another wealthy, quirky character who's orphaned at a young age." That character was, of course, Batman. Sylvester Stallone has been trying to direct a movie about Edgar Allan Poe for forever. He envisions Robert Downey Jr. in the lead role. But if they can't pull that together, might I suggest that they revive the unfilmed script Sherlock Holmes and the Vengeance of Dracula. I mean, imagine the possibilities, and also the GIFs, and further the gifts. And we return to the salon to finish up with some movie sequels, which were in various stages of planning and production before they were canceled, like E.T. 2, Nocturnal Nocturnal Fears, Airplane 3, Gladiator 2, Mrs. Doubtfire 2, Elf 2, Buddy Saves Christmas, Chinatown, which was supposed to be the start of a trilogy, The Breakfast Club sequel, Forrest Gump 2, Gump and Co., Brazzaville, the sequel to Casablanca, Basic Instinct 3, directed by, who else? Sharon Stone. Seriously, Dude, Where's My Car? Mark, that one isn't real, is it? Seriously, Dude, Where's My Car? How did that not get made? No, we just gotta put that one on Kickstarter and it'll get done like that. Then there's Kill Bill Volume 3, Twister 3D, Gremlins 3D, The Matrix 4, Napoleon Dynamite 2, and Beetlejuice 2, Beetlejuice Goes Hawaiian. Thanks for watching Monofloss here on YouTube, which is made with the help of all of these nice people. Every week we endeavor to answer one of your mind-blowing questions. This week's question comes from James Whiteford, who asks, can sharks really smell blood a mile away? Yes. In fact, according to National Geographic, great white sharks can smell blood from 3 miles away. And that, my friends, is why you don't swim in the ocean. Well, and also because it contains a lot of mussel sperm, as you'll no doubt remember from that video. You can submit your mind-blowing questions in comments. Also, let us know which of these films you would most like to have seen. I know, already, it's seriously, Dude, Where's My Car? Thank you for watching, and as we say in my hometown, don't forget to be awesome.